Hello guys, welcome to our show. Today we discuss about storytelling style, how you can adapt storytelling to business goals because it's simple to create a story, but when you need to touch your customers, it takes time and some experience. I'm so excited to discuss this topic with Gabrielle Dolan. How are you?
I am good, Anatoly. How are you?
I'm doing great. We chatted a little bit before the podcast, and I know about your experience. I love your posts on LinkedIn. Uh, Gabriel, before we start, just remind our audience about yourself, about your business, about experience, and you can touch a little bit how AI can help today, because I remember your sharing in the first episode. We didn't touch AI. Today it's a must have. So any tips about AI, your business, and creating stories?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess my specialty, my expertise is helping business people share stories more effectively in business, whether that's internally to their employees or externally to their customers or stakeholders. I got into storytelling about 20 years ago when I worked in corporate and sort of realized that the really good leaders were sharing stories and the brilliant presenters were sharing stories. And I noticed in my own role as a senior leader that when I did share stories, it seemed to have a greater impact with the people I was sharing it with. So I've been doing this now for almost 20 years, teaching people how to tell stories, long before storytelling was popular, which it quite is at the moment. So, yeah, I pretty much travel the world running storytelling training workshops, normally internally for clients. So normally clients bring me in. I do some public programs every now and again. In fact, I've got one coming up next week. But yeah, and I'd love to chat about Chat GPT and AI and how, because I'm what I'm sourcing at the moment is a lot of questions about will Chat GPT take over from stories, and I think the short answer is no, but it could be used to actually help you come up with ideas for stories.
Yeah, I agree. I think, ChatGPT is a good tool, daily tool today. Yeah, I use AI before
Mhm.
ChatGPT, but today I think that I spent more time on this tool. And, if I ask ChatGPT to write a story, I can get the story for a few seconds, but non creative, generic, nothing special. So, can you tell how to use ChatGPT in the right way? Because I often see when companies use generic prompts to get the best rewriting content ever. Rewriting, nobody cares about rewriting. Everyone wants to get something new. Any tips how to use in a smart way?
Yeah, look, and I have been experimenting because I've got a lot of my clients asking about ChatGPT and stories. I have been experimenting with it, and so a few times I, got into ChatGPT and said things like, "Tell me a story about teamwork," and I would get a story, or tell me a story around innovation. The stories it came back with, I'm going to say, weren't too bad. Like, they weren't terrible, they weren't bad, but they were lacking something. And what they were lacking was some real human connection. Now, so what I say to clients, if you need ideas around stories, it could be a good place to start. But, say for example, if you said, give me a story around innovation, and it gave you an example of something, what I would say is never use that story, because the reality is it's not your story, and the most powerful stories are your stories. So, but what it could do is it could remind you of a similar experience. So ChatGPT might come up with a story around, someone who was trying to run a race and blah, blah, blah. And you might go, oh, actually, I remember a similar time when I was, doing a big walk or whatever. So I suggest you use it for that, but it's just not going to be effective if you take something from ChatGPT and use it. First of all, it's not your story, and it lacks something. And when I say, you go, what's missing? What's missing is the personal experience, and the emotion normally is what missing.
Mhm. I want to ask you about creativity. Most marketers complain that AI is not creative. I agree, because how it can be creative if it's just rewriting, but I think creativity is a must-have. I remember a story, interesting story about Lloyd Richardson. He
Mhm.
wrote a book 14 years. 14 years he spent time to write a book. Then he published a book and wasted a lot of money in marketing, in sales, for around 11 years. Nobody cared about this book. He couldn't sell. I mean, like, to get great sales. Then his daughter posted content on TikTok about this book. This video became viral from account with 0 followers. And today this book is bestseller on Amazon. I watched this video. Of course, I'm curious. I want to know how to film such videos, plus 50 million people to get them. And I found this video is not with nice looking design. Nothing special, simple design, but that was creative. It provokes curiosity. What kind of book is this? If author spends 14 years to write a book, that was transparent. That you mentioned that if you share your story, it's more honest, transparent, authenticity, many other things. So, can you tell about creativity? How to be creative in your story?
Yeah, it's whenever I hear the word creativity, it's like, because you often hear people go, "Oh, I can't do that. I'm not creative." And it's sort of a bit like innovation. I think we think creativity is this really big thing, but the reality is, if you can cook dinner or bake a cake, that's creative. If you can, sew your clothes, that's creative. So when I think about creative, it's like, I think everyone's creative. Everyone's got because we're human, we're creative. We think of a different way to do something is creative. When it comes to storytelling, what I find is when people are in this mindset of I'm not creative, they think I don't have any stories that are worth sharing. And the biggest challenge I have to get people to understand in business is that your stories are not the most amazing, inspirational, motivational, climbing Mount Everest type stories. It's the day-to-day stories, like about you growing up or something that happened to you on the weekend. And the creativity part is, how do you take that story and link it to a business message? Now, in regards to things that go viral, we would all love The Secret for that. Sometimes I write stories and I post them on LinkedIn, and I think they're really good stories. And I think, this is going to have a real lot of, traction, and nothing happens. And then I post something that I just think's, an okay story. It's all right. And, we'll have 2 million, views on it. So you sort of don't know when it comes to creativity and what will work. But I think what happens with that story, and you were telling about, it probably came from a real place of authenticity and genuine. I think, like you said, it was the daughter the daughter sharing it. So it sort of feels like it's not selling or marketing. It just feels like a good story. And I think people
Yeah,
respond to that.
exactly. Yeah, that was a good story. Because his daughter, yeah, she did a good job, to provoke this curiosity, to share the story. And I love to learn from big brands like Apple, because Tim Cook, Steve Jobs often share stories. I think Steve Jobs uh, uh, provided this job to teach a lot of marketers today.
Mm.
Uh, and can you tell how to unite your story with products? Because I can craft a good story, and I did it many times. But when you can't sell by having the story, I often see when marketers chase vanity metrics like traffic, likes, comments, but in the end we need to sell. So our goal to sell products. So can you tell how to submit this call to action in your story?
Yeah, look, so in my latest book, and I mentioned the title and the subtitle because I think it would make sense. It's called Magnetic Stories: How to Connect with Customers and Engage Employees Through Brand Storytelling. Because that's ultimately what we're trying to do with stories. We're not trying to, like likes and shares, it's all a good indicator, but ultimately we're trying to connect and engage people with our company, our products, our services, our values, our purpose, things like that. So one of the stories I talk about is like, and this is just one, it's the creation story. So if you're talking about a product, why was it created? Like, why did we even develop it in the first place? What people, I think the mistake marketers make, and people when they're trying to sell, is they just focus on the product dimensions and benefits, and they're missing the real why it was developed. Because I think when you talk about why something was developed, why we do what we do, what comes through is a passion, or what should come through is a passion about why this is important. And even when we were talking about that just before that video went viral and the daughter did it, I would imagine, now I haven't seen it, but I would imagine what came through in that story, that she was really proud of her dad, and she was proud of what her dad had done. So I think sometimes when we share stories around a product or even around your company, why are you passionate about this, and therefore why did you start it? So normally, and you know, when you go back on that, it's normally there was a gap, or you came across someone that was really struggling and you thought this product would help them. So it's talking about why you're passionate about the value that you provide, whether it's through your product or your service.
You mentioned this word passion. I think without passion, it's better to avoid some topics, because I see when companies replicate competitors, without passion. For example, if competitors are good with SEO, it doesn't mean that you can write the same blog posts to get this traffic, or TikTok. I found many companies are trying to film these videos without passion. They just do for the sake of trend, because some companies can get great results with that. But for me, it's more important to consider your strong side. For example, if I'm good with writing, then write. If you're good with filming, then film, record podcast, find your strong side. Can you tell about passion? How to find this passion? Because, it's interesting, because many marketers told me that they don't know their passion. They don't know what to do. And I remember one book, I forget the author of this book, but the author shared a story when he got email from another book author, and this author asked for advice because he couldn't sell his books for a long time. Nobody cared about his books, and he suffered because he can't sell them. And the author replied, leave it, forget about this, it's not for you. If you are suffering to do something that it's not your strong side, it's not your passion, find something else. But if you can't live without that, then get back, to try it again. So can you tell about passion, how to be passionate in your writing?
Yeah, and look, let me cover that from a couple of things, because you're right. It's some people, like, where you go, how do you share your story? Now, if you really like writing and you prefer writing, then share it in the written format. If you're actually okay talking and being on video, and do it that way. So I think you're right. You see a lot of CEOs or business people who have been told, you should put this video on TikTok or whatever, and they're doing it almost because they've been told they have to do it. And you can just tell they're not comfortable, or it's not genuine. So I think a couple of things when it comes to sharing stories, and I see this as storytelling becomes really popular. I see a lot of companies expecting their leaders and their business people to share stories, whether that be with customers or in videos or written, but not teaching them how to do it. And so the vast majority of stories, and if you're not teaching them how to do it, it's sort of setting them up for failure. But the reality is, the vast majority of stories we should be sharing in a business setting is with individuals, like one-on-one, in meetings with employees, with customers. And yes, you might write that story up and put it on LinkedIn, for example, or you might create a video and put it on TikTok or a website or anything like that. But I would say the real passion, so coming back to passion, is passionate about what you're selling, as opposed to, you might not be, might be really great at writing, but you might go, well, it's something I need to do, and you might sort of start to enjoy it more. And when it comes to the social medias, yeah, I think social media is go where your customers are, and then find a way to make it fun for you. But I think ultimately, if you're passionate about the story you're sharing, that will come across either in your writing or in the video you're producing.
I found, that book offers are great with creating non-boring content. For example, if content creators use different formats, but they have no experience to write a book, because it takes time to write a book, like 6 months
It
and
does.
year. Yeah, it's a lot, and that's why I love this format more than any other format. For example, uh, content creators spend like a few hours to a few days to write a blog post, but to write a book it takes time, to research, to find data, to I don't know, to create the stories, to craft, to edit many things. uh, can you tell how to create non-boring content? Because for me, book offers are the best on creating non-boring content, but most content are boring, and we
Mm.
have high bounce rate today. To watch videos, like 80% of people live in the first 20 seconds. The same with website content. Most people bounce fast. So, any tips about creating non-boring content in business? Because business is boring. Most
Yes.
business insights are boring, but we need to create non-boring content.
It's going to be no surprise. It's share stories, and I fully believe most business content, whether it's reports internally or business books, they're boring because we almost think this thing, because it's business, we just have to have all the facts and the data and the logical reason, which you do. I mean, you don't want to write books that don't make sense, but bring them to life with stories. And the mistake a lot of businesses make is they believe case studies are stories. Case studies are not stories; they're case studies, and case studies are important. Like, I run a business on storytelling, and I absolutely use case studies, but they're not overly interesting because they miss that human emotional connection. So, I mean, I have a lot of potential authors or would-be authors come and ask me for advice, and the thing I say is bring your content to life through stories. And it can be personal stories and work stories, but as human beings, we enjoy listening to stories. We engage in stories. Our brain is sort of hardwired to listen to stories differently. So, of course you need data and the logic and facts in business, but if we're only having that, it's when most books are not read, most reports are not read. And so think about how you can actually first engage your audience, your potential audience, with a story to get them interested in what you've written, but also have stories in it all the time. It's no surprise, Anatoly, that I'm saying stories. If anyone's read any of my books, ironically on storytelling, but there's a lot of stories, and there's actually a lot of my personal stories. One of the biggest compliments, the most common feedback I get about my books, and as I take as a compliment, is when people read my books, they say, it felt like you were in the room talking to me. And I truly believe that that's because of two things. I share a lot of personal stories, so people get to know me better, but it's also the language you use. So trying to keep your language really simple will make your business communications a lot more engaging.
Nice, nice. Love it, love it. Guys, I'll submit all links to the books in the description. Uh, and I want to ask you about, for example, when I read the book Dale Carnegie, all his books are great, but, I found that he collected data the entire life. It's not like 6 months and year. He learned from speeches, 10,000 different conversations. He learned people to write 3 books, great books. But I think Dale Carnegie has this business, to write books, to courses. But most businesses have different products, various products, and they can write stories, today you can write a book to sell your products because it can help. I know a lot of great examples when business owners wrote a book for the sake of growing business. So can you tell what to do if you have no time? I mean, like Dale Carnegie, to spend all life, to collect data, to write these awesome books. I mean, like if you have limited time, but wanna share something valuable.
Yeah, and writing a book takes time. There is like no mistake
Yeah.
that there's a lot of time. I think the first book I wrote took 18 months, and it's like you're going. So a couple of tips. I think, first of all, if you do truly want to write a book, I would say start writing something. So I have some people that want to write a book, but I look at their LinkedIn profile example, and they haven't published one article. So it's sort of like, when people go, I want to run a marathon. Okay, do you think you might just do a 5-kilometer fun run first to see if you like? So part of me is, so that's one thing. Develop the habit of writing, because it's, again, it is like running or exercise. You've got to get into a habit of writing. And it could just be, I'm just going to find half an hour every day to write. And that might mean you wake up half an hour earlier. I know when I write my books, I'm the most creative in the morning. So I tend to wake up before anyone else has, and then spend like an hour writing, and then, the kids get up and stuff like that. But I've got an hour. And what I do in that hour in the morning when I'm really creative, I just write. I do not edit while I write. So it's just free flowing writing. I know a lot of people that prefer speaking and will just speak it out loud and get it transcribed. I then edit in the afternoon. So I don't, so to me, writing and editing are two different things, and don't try to do them at the same time. So I've found that really helps me. But it's just, if you're passionate about something and you really want to do it, you will find time. So it's like when people go, I don't have time, what they're saying is it's not my priority at the moment. And that might be fair enough. You might have, 4 young kids, and you might have a full-time job, and it's not a priority. So I think just be honest with yourself and go, it's not a priority. I do want to write a book, but it's a 3-year project. And if that's your aim, start developing your content now. So,
love it.
So I should just say that if you do the thinking once, if you've got this really great idea and you put it in a LinkedIn post, or you write an article, even internally, that is there. You could literally copy and paste that, and it sort of starts to become part of your book. Now, obviously, you're going to edit it and change it, but if you wrote an article once a month, I reckon in about 3 years you'd have some pretty good content for a book.
Yeah, love it. I remember Martin Eden, written by Jack London, plus 100 years ago, about a guy who didn't have education. He had nothing. Now he needed to work hard to earn money just to feed himself. But yeah, he found time to write and to overcome many great offers. Yeah, it's a great example.
And also too, you don't have to be a brilliant writer. So I've published 7 books, and I actually failed English in my final year of school. So if you read my school reports, my English teachers would say I was terrible at grammar and spelling, and I was. So, but I have editors. So you just sort of develop the skill. If it's something you want to do, develop it. Like if you want to be a speaker, you're going to develop that. If you want to be really good at playing tennis, then you're going to develop that. So you've got to put time and effort into it. But the most important thing is the thinking process, and how do you get your ideas out and onto paper. But yeah, writing a book is a big thing, but it's quite an amazing thing too, really, because sometimes I go into bookshops and I still see books in there like Who Moved My Cheese and Good to Great, and these books were written 30, 40 years ago, and they're still always in the top, selling business books. And it just amazes me that some books can just be so like timeless that they're still in the best selling, 30, 40 years later.
Yeah, that's why I love this format because all content should be updated time to time, but books not. Now,
Mm.
for example, Joe Sugarman wrote a few books about marketing, but I can relate all of them to digital marketing, all of them, because people are the same. Technology has changed, not people. We have the same psychology, mentality, but yeah, technology is how to create the message to people. Yeah, you can use it, but
Yeah.
with the same psychological method. Okay.
Yeah, I think, can I just say that was a really good point you made too? Like even this discussion around marketing and social
Mhm.
media and AI, that the technology will change, but as human beings, we don't. We, as human beings, we still crave the same things, and it is human connection and wanting to, we still respond to things like passion. So I think we get hung up on all the new technology and lose sight of the fundamental thing that as human beings we respond to passion and we crave emotion connection, and we are hardwired to also listen and connect with stories. So don't lose sight of those fundamentals just because the technology changes.
Yeah, nice, nice. You mentioned about your schedule that you can write in the morning. Uh, and I see that content creators can lose discipline. No, they are not consistent. Okay, they can write for a few days, then they need to go to the party, other stuff. So can you talk about your discipline, how you found this time in the morning, and how you can stick in this way? I mean, like without distractions, just to go ahead. Any tips, because we still have a lot of distractions everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an amazing what a timeline can do for you. So when I've got when I've pitched my book to the publisher and they've agreed to do it, and then they set a timeline saying, well, we need the manuscript by this date. That is amazing what discipline will do for you then. I'm currently writing another book, but I have no timeline. In fact, in my head, to me, it's like a 5-year book that I will just write over the time. So I probably don't need that discipline. It just, when something comes to me, I do it. But there's a bit of a saying with writers, and it's called, where do you get the motivation from? And they say it's called bum glue, which literally put some glue on your bum and sit in your chair and wait and just force yourself to write something. And even if it's not great, you're creating that habit. A lot of people, and this is like with everything, even exercise, I'm waiting for motivation. Don't wait for motivation. Just do something. If you act, action brings motivation, and that's why people sort of like go to gym for 2 weeks and then stop because they're waiting for motivation. It's like, don't wait for motivation. Just get up and go for a run, and just you'll feel better afterwards. And that's the same. Get up, sit down at your desk, and write. And you could write 500 words. Like even if you set a limit of, I'm going to set 500 words. The other really good place that I find really good to write is on aeroplanes. So being from Australia, I do a lot of long travel, and being on an aeroplane with no Wi-Fi and no distractions. I find that's a bit of a good time to write. And I sort of go, and it's almost I'm going to write a certain number of words and then I can watch a movie or something like that. But it's playing little games with yourself.
I'll share your tip, with my friends, because I often get response. It's annoying, to spend 12 hours in airplane, what to do. Yeah, just write, spend time.
Right.
I love reading, I love reading in airplane because it's the best time when I can uh, be on, when you have a good book, you can live on this book. You can forget about everything, meal, water, anything. You can just take part of this journey. So yeah,
Yep. Yeah.
it's my
And
approach.
and I also think too, I just thought of something because we started the conversation around creativity.
Yeah.
It's how to make if you've got an idea that you want to write about, and it could just be a LinkedIn post. It doesn't necessarily need to be a whole book. When things happen to you or you see something outside your industry, I think the creativity is linking that. Go, oh, that's sort of like what I was trying to say, and bringing in lots of different examples and metaphors to actually help people really connect with what you're writing about and what you want to say.
Nice. I have the question about mistakes. In my life, I made a lot of mistakes. I keep doing them. I think it's like part of the process, because when you start something new, you need to make mistakes. Then you can adapt, find something else. So I usually do. Can you tell common mistakes that companies can avoid by crafting their stories, and your tips how to find a much better way?
Yeah. So I think the most common there's a few common mistakes I see businesses make when it comes to storytelling. One is they think they need one story, like it's just one story to communicate, their whole brand. And it's like there's not one story. There's lots of different stories that help you communicate your brand. So that's the one mistake I see people make, thinking it's just one story or one story to communicate a strategy. I got really angry. Angry at myself. I read an article from Harvard Business Review a couple of months ago, and it was about why your strategy needs a story. And the whole article was about your strategy needing one story. And the reason it made me angry is I hear people say this a lot, and was like, how can you bring an entire strategy to life with just one story? You can't. But the fact that that message was coming from the Harvard Business Review made me really angry, because it's not just one story. And that's the biggest mistake I see companies make, trying to come up with one story. The second mistake I see them make, and I sort of mentioned this before, is that they expect their employees to be good at sharing stories, but don't teach them how to do it. Now, I know I might be biased because that's what I do. I teach people how to do it. But storytelling's a skill. If it was easy, everyone would be doing it, and they're not doing it well. So if you're asking your employees to share stories, you need to teach them how to do that properly. And if you don't, you're absolutely setting them up for failure. So that's the second mistake I see people make. And then probably the third one we sort of talked about, they think case studies are stories, and case studies are not stories. And a timeline of your company is not a story. So I think that the third mistake I see companies make is they're calling something a story and they're thinking it's a story, but it's not a story. So that's the three, I would say, the most common mistakes.
Nice. I love it. Love it. I'll consider all of them. And I'm interested about your experience. For example, I found when customers don't understand SEO, I usually tell them, take my course, learn from course, get the basic, because it's hard to cooperate with someone who doesn't understand SEO. Why we need to create high quality content, why we need to earn authoritative backlinks, use white hat SEO. So yeah, when you take the course, you can learn the basic. Then we can go ahead like a cohesive team. And according to some data studies, that companies consider only 40% of all expert recommendations. You tell that you teach businesses how to create stories. Can you tell your methods, how to transfer data, especially to business that consists with many people? You need to teach not one person, but probably one person. It depends. So I don't know who is responsible, but how to teach even one people or a team to craft a story without losing something like some tips, some recommendations, anything about that?
Yeah. So my method is, and I don't teach one person. Like if I worked with an organization and said, we want to start using stories, can you just train up this one person to help do that? I would go, no, that's not the role. Like everyone should learn this skill. So predominantly when I go into organizations, I do train the senior leaders, but it's not the most senior leaders, like it's not just the CEO and the executive leadership team. It's normally the next few layers down, because it's the leaders that are leading the people. They're having the greatest impact. And sometimes it's the frontline facing staff, because again, the greatest the greatest way we can use this in a sales process is share stories with the customer, share stories directly with the customer. So it is about training up everyone in the company that needs it. I take them through a process. Normally, I spend about half a day or a full day, but normally a half a day is enough. And I actually give them a framework. So regardless of the message and regardless of the story, I teach them this framework. The key thing, the first thing we need to do is be really clear on what the message is. So some of the basic stuff is people are trying to share a story about something, but they're not clear on what the message is, or they're trying to cover too many messages, the one strategy with the one story for the one strategy. So I take them through a process of getting clear on the messages. I introduce all these ways they actually find these stories. So where can you find both personal stories that have happened to you? So that's really important when it's talking about values, but also the work-related stories. So, if you want to talk about great customer service, then share stories about great customer service. And then I take them through the process of how they start their story and what to put in the middle, and most importantly, how to end it. So, and then I do a whole lot of other things about where they can potentially share their stories, because it's sharing their stories in multiple ways. Yes, on LinkedIn and face-to-face in presentations with customers. There's a whole lot of ways. If I could maybe just give 3 little tips. So I talked about before the 3 mistakes businesses make with storytelling. The 3 mistakes individuals make when they're sharing their stories is, I'd say they go too long. The vast majority of people, their stories go way too long. And the framework I teach helps you get your stories to 1 to 2 minutes. And there's a real technique in getting your stories that short. So that's the biggest mistake. Don't make your stories go longer than 2 minutes, because people will start not listening. And I would say another mistake we tend to make all the time is start the story with, let me tell you a story. So people go, let me tell you a story. And then when people go, let me tell you a story, it's like, oh, really? No, please don't. So it's finding natural ways to start stories, like, oh, that reminds me, when I was a kid and, I grew up on a farm, or that reminds me, 5 years ago, we went on a holiday. So it's starting your story quite naturally. And then the other mistake I see people at the end of the story is that they end their story with the moral of the story is. So the real skill is in making sure you share your story connected to your message, that people get it, but you don't want to be going, the moral of the story is, you don't want to be telling them. So they would be my three mistakes I see people make.
Valuable. Love it. And Gabriel, my final question about the future.
Mhm.
What kind of future will be in storytelling for businesses? Your prediction, forecast, any insights about that, and how companies can adapt today to this possible future?
Yeah, look, I see a very strong future for storytelling in business. Like I said, 20 years ago when I started doing this, people would be going, storytelling in business? Like, what's that? That's got nothing to do with business. I think more and more companies and individuals are realizing how powerful stories are. So, some people have said, is storytelling a fad? It's not a fad. Humans have been sharing stories for 60,000 plus years. I'm from Australia. We've got the longest culture, over 65,000 years culture of our First Nations people. And it's based on their storytelling. They share stories. So it's not going away. I think things like what will happen is with technology and, even our platform to share stories is greater. So, 20 years ago, we were just sharing stories in person. Now we can do it on social media. We can do it on, LinkedIn. We can do it on TikTok. We can do it, and who knows where our stories will go. So I think there's real storytelling finally has been seen as a critical business skill, because we are dealing with humans. And I think as long as we are dealing with humans, storytelling will remain a critical skill to learn how to do well.
Yeah, I agree. If you have the first customer AI, then probably you don't need to use stories. But
Yeah,
right
yeah, and
now,
that's that. And you know what? Often people in my workshop will say, is there a place when you can't use stories? And they say things like, "Well, you couldn't share stories to the board or to the finance people." And I go, as long as they are human, they will connect with stories. So if you're talking to a a bot, you probably don't need a story. But as long as you are talking to a human or
yeah.
interacting with a human, stories will work.
Yeah, agree. Love it, love it. Gabriel, it's a big pleasure to get to my show again. I love all your valuable insights. Tell our audience the best way how to keep learning from you, how to reach out to you, how to follow you.
Yes. Look, the best site is to go to my website, so gabrielledolan.com. There's two things on that website. I've got a 7-day storytelling starter kit. So it sort of is what it says. It's you'll get a video from me once a day for 7 days. And it's just sort of help you get started on storytelling and where you could use the skill. But I did mention I run public workshops about once or twice a year, and that's the only time I do them. And I've got one coming up on the 19th of May. So that's Australian Eastern Standard Time. So it could be on the 18th of May for anyone in the a different hemisphere. But that's my only public workshop I've got scheduled, and it may be the only one I do this year. So that's a virtual one, and it's coming up. And you can find those details on my website as well, or LinkedIn. Connect with me on LinkedIn.
Nice, guys. You can find the links in the description below. Listen us on Apple, Google, Spotify. Thanks again for your time. Love it. So valuable. I've learned how to craft stories. I use this format, but you shared a lot of valuable insights, especially don't use let me share my story. I used, so I'll change. Okay. I'll provide something else. Thanks again, Gabriel. A big pleasure. Welcome back anytime.
Yeah, thanks, Anatoly. Always a pleasure to speak